Welcome, fellow wildlife avengers, to the Conservationists Assemble. My name is Jonny Bloxham, but here I am known as my alter ego, Captain Conservation, your friendly neighbourhood animal advocate. I am a former zookeeper with a passion for conservation education and the global efforts for threatened species and habitats around the world. I am inviting you to join me as we take the fight to our planet's biggest villain and my arch nemesis, extinction. Whether you're new to animal advocacy or a veteran in wildlife preservation, this is the podcast for you. Each week, I'll be teaming up with Earth's mightiest wildlife heroes to unify the greatest collaboration of conservationists ever known, where we will be discussing our planet's epic species and what is being done to save them. This is the Conservationists Assemble. Will you join the fight? Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Conservationists Assemble. How have you all been? I hope you've all had a wonderful week. As always, I want to hear all about what experiences with nature or thoughts about wildlife you have had. Maybe you visited a zoo this week or heard some wildlife news that sparked an emotion and got you thinking. If this is you and you want to share, you can join the conversation by email or message on Instagram, both of which I've linked in the show notes. One thought I've had this week while editing this episode is not so much to do with wildlife, but actually as I was looking out my window or sitting next to my window whilst editing, it's to do with the high winds outside. And what that really means, it obviously has the potential to spread a lot of litter around or cause damage, which is obviously never convenient. But I suppose trying to put myself in the shoes of wildlife that don't have that choice, yes, they can take shelter in tree holes or underground or whatnot, but really they're they're roughing it out there, and just as an advocate for animals, that gets a lot of respect from me. They're certainly not complaining. So yeah, just decided to do a quick little bit of research and really wanted to know about what high winds mean, whether we should be concerned or what to expect from the planet's status in terms of those high winds. And it's quite interesting. I think one of the first things that come up when I started looking into it, and by no means was this an extensive research, so if anyone has more information or maybe you're a scientist and this is something that you specialize in, feel free to get in contact with the email address in the show notes. Is that actually, while we are aware that human-led climate change is very much a happening thing, there's this natural cycle in wind speeds around the planet, and since the 1970s they were anticipating this thing that was coined global stilling, where wind speeds were really, really low, but actually in the last decade or so we're starting to see those speeds picking back up again, and they were trying to figure out what that meant. And one of the theories was that the increasing urban development and other land use changes kind of definitely altered the surface of the earth and made it more likely for kind of the drag acting on the flow of air around the world to decrease the speeds. But actually now that they're starting to pick up, they're saying that at least maybe it could be another decade in terms of those peaks and troughs of climate fluctuations, I suppose, in terms of wind speeds, that actually these high wind speeds could be great for renewable energy, and they might, in terms of considering where to put more wind farms or what to do with existing wind farms. But it was just something that popped into my mind whilst editing this episode. So if you and obviously in terms of conservation, while we here on the podcast focus on the species that are threatened around the planet and the conservation actions for them, very much open to topics on things that aren't wildlife related, such as climate change and all that jazz. So yeah, if anyone out there is involved in I don't know, renewable energy or the rising temperatures and the geography, I suppose, surrounding that, get in contact. Would love to have a chat and learn a little bit more and how it all meshes into the bigger act of conservation. Yeah. Now, in terms of today's episode, we are talking about the red panda. Yes, I previously released a solo episode on the red pandas, just because they were a species close to my heart and a species that I had worked with. But while I have some information on them in terms of I used to be able to deliver talks to paying visitors at the zoo, I'm certainly, again, by no means an expert. And today I'm joined by Janno Weerman, who is the EEP coordinator for the Red Panda based out of Rotterdam Zoo. But not only that, he also is the convener of the Global Species Management Plan, which is a first for the podcast. So if you've listened to that episode already, the solo episode that is, and you want to learn a little bit more, this episode is great. If you haven't listened, perhaps go and listen to that one as kind of a precursor to this one to gauge a little bit of insight into specifically what the red panda is all about, and then come back and listen to this. So without further ado, joining me now is Janno Weerman to talk to us about what we understand of the modern population of red pandas in zoos and the work to save them. Janno, thank you for joining me today on the Conservationists Assemble podcast. How's it going?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking.
Great, I'm glad. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here, and we're here to talk about the red panda, which is certainly a species that is much more of a household name now, but hasn't necessarily always been that way. But before we really get into the depths of red panda conservation, can you just tell us listeners a little bit about who you are, where you work, and what your role is?
Yeah, sure. My name is Janno Weerman. I'm working in Rotterdam Zoo. I'm working there for 26 years already. I started out as a keeper in 1998, and I worked with different taxonomic groups. I started with birds, and then to gorillas and giraffes, carnivores, a nocturnal house, the aquarium, and later on with the elephants. And after that period, I became a head keeper, and I was responsible for different departments. And then I became curator, and now I'm the operational or the manager living collection in Rotterdam Zoo. So I'm responsible for everything that has to do with animals, plants, in the veterinary department.
Amazing. So certainly a career packed full of various different challenges and various different experience as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, like we've said, we're here to talk about red pandas, and before we really get into the conservation actions that are taking place for them, could you just tell us a little bit about red pandas, please?
Yeah, sure. Now, I was, until 2014, I was not really involved in red pandas. I was a keeper for red pandas, and I really liked them from the start because it's a very peculiar species, carnivore that eats bamboo, so it's pretty and not well known to the general public, I think, until maybe 10 years ago. So it's a very nice species to work with. And I think it's also a program within the EASA community that started with this breeding program in the early 70s. So it's almost 50 years old now, the breeding program. And I think that's fascinating as well, because we know we've got 100% pedigree known. That for a species that's so long in captivity is pretty special, I think. And especially, I think, the last 10, 15 years, we did a lot of work on conservation in situ and ex situ. So I think we come a long end, and I think especially thanks to all my predecessors who did excellent work, we are now at the point we are at the moment, and we can be very proud of that, I think, as a zoo community.
Yeah, definitely, and you've touched on lots of points that I wanted to build on there, and that first one is kind of how red pandas suddenly have had that transition into almost the mainstream in terms of what the public are able to recognise. So, what do you think the key factors are in the red panda finally having that increase in notoriety?
Yeah, cannot really pinpoint what's exactly going on, but I think also on social media you see them more often. And I think we've got, of course, a movie. We got the Explorer Firefox. So I think everything combines, and of course we got almost 190 zoos within Europe keeping red pandas. So I think there's also a lot of interest in red pandas, and of course they look very fluffy.
Hmm.
So when you see them, they are very nice to see, and I think they people will have a kind of emotional bond with them, and that's different with turtles and snakes, for example. So it's some, and I think an animal for children, but also for adults. When you look at them, then you just want, yeah, it's there, and it's charismatic, and it's nice, and so I think everything combines. Yeah, did what we are at the moment. So I think it's yeah, a combined efforts of everybody that's involved in red pandas, and of course because they are just cute if you see them.
They are, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely very cute, and yeah, that definitely is a big bit of the appeal. So you mentioned kind of how they're a predominantly herbivorous carnivore, and that is kind of one of the many unique questions that red pandas have raised in terms of their husbandry under human care. With that being said, in your opinion, what are some of the most crucial developments in red panda husbandry throughout their history in human care? Because, like you said, the EEP alone has been around for half a century now, and Rotterdam's history with red pandas spans nearly over a century now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in your opinion, what are some of the kind of key developments in red panda husbandry that have attributed to their increase in lifespan, for example, or the success of the breeding program, and what has this knowledge provided to the larger puzzle of red panda conservation?
I think the key husbandry thing is diet, because I think when they came in the 70s, a lot of fruit and vegetable were fed, and not a lot of bamboo, and especially not a lot of high fiber products. So I think we came along and there, but even until today, I see some zoos still feeding fruits and vegetables, and that we feed a small portion of the diet. That's not a big issue, but they mainly need just high fiber diet with a lot of bamboo. So I think that's the key factor, and of course also uh, providing them suitable enclosures with preferable live trees that they can go up hyper tree, and also with breeding. If you've got a breeding facility, that you always got dens and enough dens so the mother can go with the cubs to a clean one. So I think it's a combined effort, but especially I think diet is the key factor in everything. Because at the beginning we didn't know a lot of red pandas, so we thought it's a carnivore, and not really. So we give them some fruit and vegetables, but also mice or chicken or whatever. But nowadays it's mainly just high fiber biscuits, a commercial
Hmm.
biscuit, and a lot of bamboo, of course. And that's the main diet, and they do well on that.
Yeah, I suppose it's important to mention. Like you said, we didn't know a lot about red pandas, and I suppose initially a lot of that was just taxonomically they weren't placed in well, they've been placed everywhere, really,
Yeah,
haven't they?
yeah, yeah.
From obviously sharing in the namesake with the giant panda to the raccoon family, and now
Yeah.
we obviously know that they're taxonomical, kind of distinct and a species of their own. Focusing on that history with red pandas, and like you mentioned previously, having that really good understanding of the genetics from red pandas when they were first brought into zoos. Could you please give us an insight into that current population of red pandas in zoos from an EEP perspective, considering that, like you said earlier, we didn't know much about them, and it was perhaps deemed a failing captive population to now a stable population that provides effective supports in situ conservation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when you're looking at the population currently, we got around 420 animals within Europe, and they all originate from 28 founders. So it's not a very broad base, but it's okay. And if you look at the genetic variety diversity within the population, it's still above 91%. So we're doing pretty well. We don't see any health issues, severe health issues until now. So it seems that the population is pretty viable and also genetically stable. And the nice thing nowadays is because in the early days we based everything on pedigree and not on genetics itself. It was just an assumption we made about the pedigree and that all animals that are founders were unrelated, but we didn't know for sure, of course. So we didn't know exactly what the genetic variety was within the population. But nowadays we are working with universities, and now we also got good insight in the genetic diversity based on their genes and their DNA. And luckily that if you compare the pedigree with the genes, then it's comparable. So the assumption we made, fortunately, are correct. So that's nice. So we got a healthy population so far. And of course, the EEP is part of a GSMP, and GSMP stands for Global Species Management Program. That's under the flag of AVASA. So if you look at the whole global population in zoos and aquaria, then we got around 1,050 animals. But we have to make a side note that the two subspecies/species, because you got a debate is still going on if the Styani and the Filgans are two separate species or subspecies.
Sure. So
that's something we want to investigate further on. But the good thing is that since the start of the International Stud Book, we always kept the two subspecies separate. So we don't have mixed breeds in there. So we got a pure Chinese Styani population and a pure Himalayan subspecies. So that's the good thing from the population. And that's also thanks to my colleague Angela Gladstone, who started the program in the early 70s, that she just separated them from the beginning and did a great job, I think, starting the program, and that's why we came that far. So we're very happy what she initiated in the 70s.
Yeah, shout out to Angela Gladstone there. Yeah. She wrote kind of the Red Panda Bible, so to speak, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. Yeah, she did. Yeah.
I did a lot of reading of that ahead of our conversation today. But you've actually, touched on some points there, especially with the Global Species Management Plan, because there aren't that many of them in existence. When you talk about EEPs, there's hundreds of EEPs for lots of different species, but only a handful of global species management plans on listed on the WASA website, for example.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Why do you think that is? But how do they complement EEPs and kind of what other things do the GSMPs contribute that maybe EEPs don't?
I think it's especially the intercontinental cooperation and awareness for the species in general. And I think especially because within the GSMP we also got the range state country India in there. So it makes everything a little bit less complicated. And especially, I think, in regions like India, but also Nepal, it's good to have a global effort. So if you go to the government, for example, and you say you are a GSMP, that works better than you see we only are an EP. But they love structured situations. So if you have got a GSMP, it's easier to go to range state countries and ask for cooperation. And I think also for looking at husbandry, it's good to share all your experiences with the different populations in the world, because we all do it a little bit differently. I think everybody knows that the US is a little bit more focused on training. So it's everybody is do it a little bit different, but I think we can learn from each other's good point, but especially also from the things that are not going that well. And I think we are learning every day, and also even with stud books that are more than 50 years old, we are learning every day. And I think if I look at the GSMP, we always try to help each other out with resources, with research, to combine all efforts. And I think that's the the power for a GSMP that we're doing everything together with the same goal, and everybody plays his own role in there. And yeah, some like Europe, and we are 50 years old, the breeding program, and we got some breeding programs in India that are only 15 or 20 years old. So we can really help each other out. Also, for example, in how is a breeding program working? We are working with species 360, and then we've got Sims for stud book. That's what it's called. So that's an online program we use, but not everybody is very familiar with that yet. So also, I think we are, as Europeans, but also Americans, we can help our colleagues in Japan or in India to get acquainted to the program. So we can help each other out, and I think we just can help each other out with everything for the good for red panda conservation in general.
And just going back to kind of how Angela, rightly so from the beginning, kind of separated the Stiani and the Fulgens kind of subspecies or species. Was it kind of a selective decision that kind of the Chinese red panda would be on the North American continent and the Himalayan red panda would be in Europe, or was that just kind of freak accident?
I think it's both a bit. I think it was because we got a lot of contacts, of course, in that time, colonial period. After the colonial period, we got a lot of contact with India, of course. So all the founder animals came from that region. So that was also the luck, I think, for the European population. And the US started a little bit later with pandas, and then also the Siani came into place. But I think Angela then already decided we have to separate two subspecies. So I think it was kind of accident, but after the action, then she really focused on the two subspecies and want to keep it separately.
Yeah. No, it sounds like it was the best decision overall. But yeah, sometimes when you hear about animals coming into human care, sometimes it's just kind of happened that way by accident. So yeah, it was interesting to hear how they separated. Yeah.
Because I think, for example, if you look at giraffes, we've got a lot of hybrids in there, and luckily with the red pandas we didn't. But I think because it was managed at the beginning with the red pandas from very strictly, and I think that's also why we got a healthy population so far without any hybrids.
Yeah, definitely, and yeah, it's certainly, I guess, made the process going forward a lot smoother.
Yeah.
So, regardless of species, it's clear that the power of partnership in conservation is crucial. As a representative of Rotterdam Zoo, talk to us about your experience with the Red Panda network and in particular how these in situ and ex situ organisations directly work with each other.
Yeah, I think we started working together with Red Panda network since their founding, Angela did, and I think especially in the beginning it was mainly donating money to Red Panda Network. That was, I think, especially how we worked with Rotterdam together with Red Panda Network, was really donating money, and they did really good stuff already back then. But I think around 2014, 13, we decided we want to have a more intense cooperation, but we also want to use our experiences for the benefit of the conservation in situ. So we also talked with Red Panda Network, for example, about doing research with camera traps and with GPS coloring, and I think especially the knowledge we've got in zoos are very beneficial for the in situ conservation. So we decided the first step was to do a camera trapping survey. So we funded the camera traps, but also some expertise, because the guys in Nepal, for example, are very bright, but sometimes lack the technical skills to do something. So I had the privilege at that time to go there and give some workshops on camera trapping and how to use the camera traps and how to use the technical part of that. And I think that's the way things work. We don't want to take over there. And that's, I think, the beauty on Red Panda Network, because they work with the local community. And I think that's the most important thing in conservation. You have to involve the local community. And at the end, they have to do the conservation work, and they have to benefit from conservation. Because if the local community is not benefiting from conservation, it will not last. It will end someday. And I think that's the beauty of Red Panda Network, that the local community is totally involved. And I think now when we And our role as a zoo is, I think, to give them the experience and the knowledge. And that's what we did, for example, with the camera trapping. We just provided them the knowledge with workshops, and after that, it's their thing. It's their country, it's their habitat, it's their forest, their animals. So they have to do the job. And I think that's the beauty of the cooperation, also with zoos in general, with Red Panda Network, that they just accept our information, our donations, and the knowledge, and they really go to work with that. And that's also another example is the GPS research we did together. Rotterdam Zoo funded the GPS research, but not only that, we also tested the GPS collars in Rotterdam Zoo, because it was never done before. And before you do a research in the wild, you want to know that the equipment you use are fit for the purpose. So we collared two of our red pandas in Rotterdam, and we just tested the software but also the hardware, and we wanted to see, does the collars change their behavior? Do the collars maybe conflict or have some injuries, whatever? So we tested that for 6 months, and based on the information we got from our test in Rotterdam, we changed the collars a bit, and then we wrote a scientific paper on that. And that scientific paper was the base for the Nepali government to agree upon the research over there, because they didn't want to give approval because they didn't know if the collars were right. So when we did the research in Rotterdam and we had a scientific paper, and then they said, okay, we understand that's done well. We got some scientific based evidence that it's working. So now we're gonna give you the approval to go ahead with your research. So after our research in Rotterdam, we collared 10 red pandas in eastern Nepal. And we got, I think, great insight in behavior of red pandas in a human-dominated landscape. So based on the information we got from the GPS collaring research, we can have more focused conservation efforts, because now we know how big their habitat is, home range is. We know if they go near villages and what the influence of roads are. So now we can make more evidence-based decisions in conservation. So it wasn't, and I think that's how we have to work together. We got specific knowledge within zoos that they do not have in the range state countries. So if we just can help each other out with knowledge and expertise and sometimes money, I think we can achieve something excellent together.
Yeah, I think that's really fantastic, and it kind of certainly highlights the transparency that the zoos are having these days in terms of showing the world what they're all about, and that they're not obviously just displaying animals for entertainment anymore, which we know is the case and has been the case for a long time. But just going back to kind of that study where you had the collars on the red pandas at Rotterdam, what was the public perception like to that?
I think they really understood, but also were surprised that we had this role in society and conservation in general. Because I think you're right that maybe 90% of our visitors are here for a nice day out, and they do not have any clue that we are doing more than just having animals in our care. And I think that's the way forward for zoos as well, because we are not just entertainment. Of course, if people come to our zoos, we want to have that they have a great day out, but we want to have that they learn something, that they go home and they've got some perspective how they can change their own life a bit to make a better world. Just eat a little bit less meat, go to work by bike if that's possible. Don't buy a new iPhone or telephone every year. Just be aware of the impact we as humans have on the world, and just take your responsibility in that. And that's, I think, what we want to do in zoos in general. And I, of course, can only speak specific for Rotterdam Zoo. We launched our new master plan last November, in November 2023. And we want to grow from a traditional zoo to a center for conservation and research. And that's what we are all about. And we also told our public we are going to focus on 10 impact species, and those species we want to allocate most of our resources to. And that's not that we're only going to keep 10 species within our zoo, but those 10 species we want to make impact on that to downgrade them on the red list.
Sure.
So that's we want to have more focus in that, and really with all the communication we do to the public, if it's social media or whatever, we want to focus on conservation and research. And that's of course sometimes difficult to comprehend for the public because they don't. You're not conservation. You're just a nice day out. But I think we have to educate our public that we've got a different role in society nowadays.
Absolutely, yeah. And it sounds, I mean, it's constantly evolving, isn't it? As everything progresses, you know, zoos adapt and evolve with it. But it's nice to be able to say, well, this is what's going to be happening over the next 5, 10, 15 years as everything progresses, and hopefully then you've got that kind of fandom also almost of visitors that then will come along with you on that journey and celebrate those results with you as and when they are achieved.
I think but that's what you say, that celebrate the achievements we made. I think within Rotterdam we got a master plan until 2050, and we got impact measurements we want to reach every year, and every November we got Rotterdam Impact Month, and we communicate with ourselves but to our public what we achieved in that year, and did we achieve what we agreed upon at the beginning of the year. So we want to be very transparent about what are our goals for this year and which impact do we want to make, but also report back on those impacts, because sometimes it's not always possible because something happened, but then we want to explain and be transparent. If we didn't make it, why did we make it? So I think it's very good for zoos to be more transparent in what they do, and it's not only with conservation but also the breed and cull policy within zoos is also very controversial with a lot of people, and that's also because, in my opinion, the general public does not have the knowledge we have within zoos why we do, for example, breed and cull. Because the only reason, in my opinion, we use the breed and cull option is for the well-being and welfare of our animals in our care. But it's a difficult subject, and it's difficult to explain, and especially if you do not have all the inside information, it's difficult to comprehend that bit. But I think also in that thing we have to be transparent.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? Because those conversations require a lengthy amount of time, and it's not necessarily time that as animal advocates or those working within ex situ populations we're necessarily granted with the public because of the demands of the role and how multifaceted it is. It's perhaps important that going forward zoos try to make that time to have those lengthy conversations. Yeah,
and that would be nice, because in my opinion we do not have we don't have the good discussions, because in my opinion sometimes the animal, I'm very happy with animal rights activists, but I would wish that we could have discussions with them instead of just opponents and just discussing through social media. You would hope we could just have an honest discussion, because I really think we've got the same perspective and the same goals as they have, but we never got into the right conservation yet. So I really hope we can have that discussion together, and because I think we both want the best for the animals in our care and for the animals on our planet.
Yeah, that's ultimately it, isn't it? You know, whether you're from a zoo background or a kind of an animal rights background, we both want to see animals continuing to thrive on the planet. It's just perhaps the methods that are very different, and kind of the plan of getting from A to B that differs, and so it would be interesting to have that conversation and ultimately try and get everyone on the same page.
That would be great.
So aside from the red pandas housed at Rotterdam Zoo that you may have a physical connection with, just like say through your time keeping with them, as the EEP coordinator, with the information that you have access to, have you ever found yourself following the journey closely of a red panda or any particular individuals that you've never met?
Not really, but when we send, for example, individuals from the European populations to India, then I'm really keen of following them, because in India we are doing an augmentation program, so 5 animals from the captive population are augmented to the population in Singalila National Park. So I find it very interesting to see if we send animals, for example, from Europe to India and their offspring will go to the wild. Yeah, that's something I follow because that's very close or near my heart, and that's why I do the work in
Hmm.
zoos and do the EP. So yeah, I think those individuals I'll follow, but the rest, because we got more than
Yeah,
420 animals, it's
sure.
very difficult to keep track of them. And of course, sometimes if some health issues occur, then you are very curious how they are doing. But
Hmm.
that's yeah, I think maybe a few a year, but that's it. Unfortunately,
Sure.
would be
Yeah.
nice to do more, but it's also very time consuming to
Yes,
to
I can
follow
imagine.
them. But I think yeah, I find it very interesting to see if animals from the population in Europe go to India and what happens with them over there.
Yeah, certainly. I can imagine. Yeah, it almost feels as part. Well, it is as part of a bigger picture. So yeah,
Yeah,
you'd absolutely want to keep up with how they're going. And so yeah, no, I think that gives us a really good insight into kind of the current status of red pandas housed in Europe and the conservation actions taking place. Certainly very exciting with the five that are being reintroduced into the national park and what that means going forward. We're just now going to have a look into your career and background and kind of your journey to where you are today. So you mentioned that you've been at Rotterdam for 20 plus years and 10 years as the EP. So yeah, if you could just give us an insight into your academic journey and your route to your journey, your position now, please.
yeah. Now, I really, when I started working Rotterdam Zoo as a zookeeper, I really loved to do the job because I think zookeeping is a great profession. Every day is different, and yeah, and with nice colleagues that they've got yeah the same passion as you got. So that was great to start with. And at a certain point, I had some ambitions to do something else, and also we have got some little bit more influence on husbandry and stuff like that. So then I applied for a job within Rotterdam Zoo as a head keeper, and it's always difficult, of course, because you got a lot of zookeepers that want to grow within the organization or within the zoo world, but unfortunately, we only have limited space for
Hmm.
that. So I was very lucky to became a head keeper, and I did that for I think maybe 7 or 8 years, and then I became a curator. And what I find great with position where I'm at the moment is that you got your knowledge as a keeper and you can just if decisions are made you always can refer back to your time as a keeper because I know also with some board of directors it's and I can imagine it's very hard if you have to make strategic decisions you not always know what that means for the operation or for the
Hmm.
zookeepers and in my opinion I know what zookeeping is about and how much time taking care of your animals will cost. And sometimes when you've got figures, taking care of your elephants will cost you 16 hours a day for two
Hmm.
keepers. That seems nice on paper, but I know it's different and it differs per day, per week, per month. So you always have to take that into account. And I think in my position as manager living collection, I hopefully can stand for the keepers and know what they want and what they need and that you just take that knowledge and that experience you have as a keeper to the role what I'm at the moment and I think that's very valuable for me as a person but also hopefully I hope the keepers will think that way as well that it's valuable for them as well that you just know what's going on and that you know how they think and what's necessary to take good care of your animals so and I have got had the privilege because what I say sometimes you want to grow and but you have a position has to be vacant and that's of course not always the case. So I think I was also very lucky that I could grow from keeper to head keeper to curator and now for manager living collection. And for me that's the ideal career I had until now. Working 25 plus years, I'm going to work every day with a smile on my face and believing I'm doing something for the world, for the animals in our care, and that you make can make a difference. Maybe how small it is, but you can make a difference in the world. And I think that it's for every people that's working in a zoo. And it doesn't matter if you're a zookeeper, if you're
Hmm.
working in a restaurant, if you're cleaning the toilets. I think every employee within the zoo has got his own position, and they all benefit to the total picture of conservation in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And along the way of those kind of career milestones from keeper to head keeper to curator, when did you know that you were going to work in conservation?
I think from the beginning on, I studied animal management in applied university, and that was the reason I wanted to work in zoos. Of course, I like taking care of animals, and I like zookeeping, but always in the back of my mind was conservation was the main reason to work in zoos. And and I think even in that days, because sometimes I think people think that conservation in zoos is new in the
Hmm.
last 5 or 10 years, but in my opinion, that's not the case. I think we are working on that on maybe 30, 40 years, but it's progressed slowly. And of course, nowadays with social media, it's much easier to get public awareness for conservation. And in the old days, that was not the case. But I think yeah, we are working in zoos on conservation for decades now. And that's always the main reason I wanted to work in zoos, and still is the reason I want to work in zoos. I don't want to work in an entertainment park, and that's fine if you want to. That's nothing wrong with that. But I want to work in a zoo like Rotterdam
Hmm.
that's got conservation and science. That's the main reason we are here every day.
And what was your first experience with a zoo? Was it when you got your first job, or was there kind of a moment in time growing up that zoos really came onto your radar?
I think at an early age I really liked zoos. I think primary school already, and I didn't know what kind of profession I wanted to pursue. And at first I thought something, always something with animals.
Hmm.
And then I thought being a vet someday, but I thought, yeah, that's mainly with sick animals, and I want to do healthy animals. And I think from an early age, also interested in populations, also in the wild. And then I started visiting zoos within the vicinity of my home at that time. So I was always a little bit focused on zoos in general. And then, yeah, I found a education with wildlife management that was also focused on zoos and wild parks. So then when I graduated, I had the luck that I just right after graduation I could start at Rotterdam Zoo as a zookeeper, and I never left because it's a great it's a great zoo, great colleagues. We are progressing in my opinion in the right direction.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm just the lucky one that I've got a I've got the privilege to work in a zoo, the privilege to work in Rotterdam Zoo, and the privilege to have a career path from zookeeper
Hmm.
to yeah, manage a living collection. So I'm a very happy guy.
Yeah, it certainly shows. And what about your first experience with red pandas? Because like you've mentioned, you've been across a range of taxonomical groups, and it wasn't until 2014 that you became the EEP coordinator, but you did always like them. So
Yeah,
walk us through that first experience with red pandas from kind of entering an enclosure with one.
yeah. I think at that time when I was a zookeeper, we had two couples of red panda, and yeah, I find them fascinating, but that was it. But then we had to catch those animals because they had to get their vaccination,
Hmm.
and they were not only cute but also very feisty. And catching them was uh, quite a challenge.
Yeah.
And from that day on, found them very interesting, and I started reading about them, and then I thought, no, taxonomically they're very interesting. Nothing to do with a giant panda,
Hmm.
and also the taxonomic features like a false thumb and stuff like that. So I thought it are very interesting animals in their own taxonomic group, the only living relative of that taxonomic group. So that's what my sparked my interest in red panda. And then, yeah, of course, I talked to Angela and Martin van Wees, who was always did also did the stud book before me. Talked to them about the stud book, and then I was even more interested in seeing it was started in the 70s and that the population was doing well and was growing. And so, yeah, I just rolled into the stud book and got the privilege that Angela and Martin van Wees just took me by the hand and just helped me out with the stud book. So, yeah, really thankful for those two guys that they help me, and I can get because I just feel good when I'm working on a stud book.
Hmm.
And but especially when I see the link we got with conservation in general, and I think this could be a kind of a blueprint for more breeding programs to work in this matter. Also with an organization like Red Panda Network, I think we are really doing a great job. And this is an example of how the zoo world can work together with a non-government organization within, for example, Nepal, and you can do good stuff together, and we can learn from each other, and we got our own specific knowledges we can just combine and make the best of it. So yeah, I'm very happy with how the program is, and hopefully can proceed in the future.
Well, I suppose then that's a kind of a good point to bring up, that the primary reason why the camera trap footage, or the camera trap program was set up, was to monitor red pandas, but actually that opened up the doors to see other species like the marbled cat, and so
Yeah.
it goes deeper than kind of maybe what the surface role
yeah.
of that project might have been.
Yeah, I think the red panda is an umbrella species for the whole high altitude Himalayan uh, habitat, and so yeah, when we conserve red panda and their habitat, we're conserving so many species of plants and animals over there, because I think it's a very fragile area where they live. It's
Hmm.
and especially with global warming, we already see some impacts of global warming on the area over there, because it's getting warmer, and the high altitude species of plants are just disappearing slowly, and with the snow as well. If there's no snow, there's no melting water, so it's everything is combined. So we have to really conserve the areas over there, and restore the habitat over there. But also, yeah, as humanity, look at the population in
Mm,
general, and hopefully we can slow down global warming together.
sure.
But
Yeah.
but that's not something we can do on our own. But what we can do as zoo community and our conservationists in the field is, what we can do is protect areas and restore areas, so we can make the best of it. Because that's something you hear in society. Yeah, we can't do anything about it. Of course, you can do something. We can do our utmost best to protect species, protect habitat. That's what we can do. And of course, maybe it's not enough, but then we tried at least. And I think that's all purpose. We have to try the best we can, and a little bit more than that, to preserve those animals for disappearing forever.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we as a planet, we're warming to the idea of that conservation. But like you've said, in terms of zoos progressing, it's slow, and everything outside of it is equally as slow, isn't it? So it's just playing that long game.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned how kind of Angela and some of your kind of predecessors were influences or mentors in your career.
Yeah.
What advice would you now give to someone looking to pursue a career in conservation?
I think be patient, because sometimes it will take a while before you go into the right positions to do conservation. Conservation takes a lot of time. For example, now if you look at the red pandas, we are working for 50 years on a breeding program, and I think 3 years ago was the first real step into conservation, that we can use our backup population for restoring populations in the wild. So it took 50 years. And if you also look at restoring habitat, the trees we plant this year or next year, it will take at least 30, 40 years, because we got suitable habitat for red pandas, for example. So everything it will take a long time. And I know the generation from now, sometimes they are a bit in a hurry, and I can
Hmm.
understand. They're looking at social media, everything is fast. But I think, please look at conservation. It will take time, because things take time. You have to deal with political situations. So I think be patient. That's the advice I can, because I wasn't patient when I was 20 or 25. Then you want to have things done quickly,
Yeah.
as soon as possible, but sometimes things take time. So that's my main advice: be patient, but be passionate about what you do. Because if you're passionate about what you do, it may take time, but if you got the passion and drive to go for it, then it will happen. Maybe not within a year, not within 2 years, but if you got the passion and the real drive to pursue conservation, it's gonna happen.
Yeah, some great words there that I imagine a lot of people will take on board and relate to. So I think, yeah, we've kind of covered how you got to where you are and what you're all about. So we're just going to finish up our conversation with some light-hearted questions. So aside from red pandas, and obviously you've had the opportunity to go to Nepal, but are there any dream species that you'd love to work with or to see in the wild?
I wanted to go to Madagascar someday to look at the lemurs, but I'm also the vice chair for the small carnivores. And when you look at the boki, ringstep, fonsera, and animals like that are rapidly disappearing, so I would love to go to Madagascar and see those beautiful wildlife over there. So that would be something that I would like to do for the future. And what I really like that I was privileged to go to Nepal, to see the wildlife over there, but also interact with the local community. Because if you look how back to earth those guys are, and they are happy with everything they've got. And if you compare it with our Westerners, they've got nothing, but they are happy with what they have. So also that's also a life lesson learned when you are there. The heated water up from your shower is not something that's normal. That you've got a roof above your head is not normal. That you've got savings in your bank account is not normal. And we think everything is normal, but we are the happy few in a world that got everything we want. And I think when you just can look from it from a different perspective, it gives you, you just look differently at the world. And I would suggest everybody that's got the opportunity to do so. So be happy with what you have.
Yeah, I can imagine it's quite humbling. And I suppose actually we should really give a shout out to the Red Panda Network, and hopefully I'd love to have an episode with some of the Red Panda Network team in the future. But yeah, the Forest Guardians in particular, they're doing some great work to improve the standards of the living conditions for the people who protect the red pandas. So yeah, I think that's certainly something that I'll hope to promote in the future. Yeah,
that would be great. Yeah.
So after a day fighting extinction, how do you relax?
I like to do a lot of sports. I go by bike to work, so it's only 10 kilometers to home, so that's nice by bike. So just with your head in the fresh air, in the wind, through your hair, so that's nice. And I like to go to the gym or to do some running, stuff like that. So that's always nice, because my job used to be very, very physical as a zookeeper, but nowadays my days are filled with meetings and being at the office, so I can just relax to do some exercise outside work.
Fantastic. And how can listeners follow your work, or kind of the work of the Red Panda EP and Rotterdam Zoo?
Of course, you can look at our website, and that's also nice to see our master plan 2050, what we want to achieve in 2050. And of course, the EASA websites, we've also got the pages for the different EPs, so you can follow us. And I think a Red Panda Network website is also a very nice website to visit. You see all the efforts they are undertaking. Another one is, I think, when you look at Darjeeling Zoo, that's the zoo where we work together with, and they are also doing the augmentation program. They've got also a lot of valuable information on their website. So if you want to follow Red Panda, the Red Pandas, I think Red Panda Network, Rotterdam Zoo, and Darjeeling Zoo are nice to follow.
Yeah, I'll be sure to provide links to all of those. So, Janno, do you have any last messages for our listeners?
I think when we want to change the world, we have to change ourselves and look differently at the world and just take action. I think that's the only thing we can do. We can look at other ones. We can look at the political situation. I think we have to make the right decisions for our own and for the world. And it all starts with ourselves.
Well, a great point to finish up on there. So, Janno, thank you so much for your time and teaming up with me on the podcast to talk about the red pandas and the work for all the conservation actions for them. We look forward to kind of seeing future developments and wish you all the best in the remainder of your work.
Thank you very much for having me on the podcast, and hopefully people are enjoying the podcast and information we are talked about.
And of course, a huge shout out to you, my fellow wildlife avengers, for tuning in. If you've enjoyed this volume of the podcast and wish to join the fight, please follow and rate the podcast wherever you stream from, and share with your family and friends to help stack the odds in conservation's favour. Don't forget, you can join the fight by joining the conversation. Share your thoughts and suggestions on this episode, past episodes or future episodes via email at conservationists@outlook.com or on Instagram, both of which are included in the show notes. Also included in the show notes are links to Rotterdam Zoo's programme, the Red Panda Network and the Darjeeling Zoo too. Be sure to check out their amazing work also. Finally, if you have happened to snap pictures or videos of red pandas at a zoo or in far off lands, these are also the places to share them to be featured on the podcast Instagram page. Be sure to tune in to next week's fantastic episode. Until then, this is Captain Conservation signing off, over and out.